Welcome to 15 Minute Bites, the podcast where tech conversations come in small portions and always with a great recipe at the end. I'm your host, Marty, and with each episode, I spend about 15 minutes with someone that I admire from the tech field. And we talk briefly about what they're doing, what they're building, what their engagement is with it. And then we switch gears to something really more important, food. So each of our guests bring a recipe, either that they've made or that they really admire. Maybe it's a family recipe, but they haven't made it. And it's fun to kind of get the stories behind them. And I do a fair amount of cooking myself. So I looked at the recipe for today and it's like, okay, so you do this, but but I heard people do this, or I was fascinated by some of the alternate spices that you had in there. But with me today is Bob Wood. And Bob is familiar to the Apple Mac community, and I will see Bob at MacStock in the next week. And he's a tech enthusiast. He also has been involved with Mac user groups. And I would say it's fair to say we met at MacStock more than a few years ago. Bob has always got a great presence there, and it's good to see him. He's also a part of the old Mac gang. I recruited him to join the podcast when we first started it. And we're already up to 75 episodes. 74 technically. We'll be at 75 next week. So, So, Bob, welcome. And tell us a little bit about yourself. Give listeners or viewers a little bit more of your tech engagement, and then we'll move right into the recipe.
Well, you asked about what I'm involved with right now. Today was the day for me to install my new dash cam.
Wow.
This camera has 4 cameras, front, back, right, and left. And it went pretty well. Unfortunately, I had to do it in the garage because it was too hot outside. It was only 95 degrees in the garage. And it was pretty fiddly getting it in, but technically straightforward. Then I started the car, pulled it out on the driveway, and started working with the app on my iPhone. And it's one of those apps where all of the directions are written in English by someone who does not have English as their first language. And it makes tech a little bit difficult. But I think I am getting there. And I really wanted to get this in place for a couple of reasons. First of all, I bought it on Amazon Prime Day, and it was like 30% off. Secondly, I'm going to be driving to MacStock like you, Marty, but I'm driving a little further. And so I wanted to get it in place there. And like insurance, I hope I don't need it. The thing I really want to use it for is to capture vanity plates, because they're interesting and fun. And some of us here in Tucson at the Tucson Mac User Group have a message thread where there are some jokes and there are some vanity plates and there is some actual real discussion too. So I wanted to have that all in place for our trip. The good news is I have a co-pilot on the eastbound end of this trip. And Marty, you have seen him at every MacStock,
Right?
Almost every MacStock. It's Roger, and he's the guy who does the eCam stuff for Mike Potter.
Yeah, he manages that and does a marvelous job at it, just running the cameras. And, occasionally Roger gets thrown some curves, and that's always kind of fun to watch him troubleshoot that. I know it's not fun for Roger, but it's fun for me to watch Roger troubleshoot that. So yeah, you're talk a little bit about your involvement with T-Mug.
Well, Tucson Macintosh User Group has been around since the early days of Macintosh. It spun off from an Apple user group before that. I moved to Tucson after being uh, after 50 years of shoveling snow. My wife and I decided that we wanted to move to the sunshine. Sunshine right now is at 104 degrees, and when I'm done here, we're going to jump in the pool for a little bit. So,
And the Midwest is looking pretty good right now for you at 104 degrees.
yeah, other than the fact that the mosquitoes are the size of robins,
Yeah.
but I've been involved with the Tucson Mac user group before I was officially a Arizona resident, and I volunteered to run for vice president. And a couple of years later, our president had a stroke, and he needed to step back. He's now the vice president, and I've been, unfortunately, El Presidente for life for the past decade or so. But let's talk about food.
I wish you a long life. Let's say that, maybe not a long presidency, but a long life. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about food, because there are a couple of things that triggered some childhood memories for me when I read through the recipe. And then you sent a really good pan to cook this in. And you didn't realize you touched on an area that I have used these pans for. We'll talk about that when we get to it. So tell us a little bit, and I have the recipe up. For those of us who are watching the video, you'll see the recipe. It'll also be in the show notes. And for those of you who are just listening to the audio portion, check the show notes. You'll get the full recipe out of that. So introduce this, because this has, I think, some family history for you, and you talk about it with great reverence when you've brought it up.
Well, I do. This recipe came from my mother. When she was a girl, her name was Melva Mabel Menzel, and she was the daughter of a butcher in Racine, Wisconsin. And to this day, or for the rest of her life, she was a beef kind of person. Pork is okay, chicken once in a while, but anything that swims was not for her. But she tried to accommodate her husband and her children by making fish sticks once or twice a year. And that was a big accommodation for her. Meatloaf is a humble comfort food, and it is for me too. This version is pretty much can be almost anything you want it to be. It's almost a blank palette. You have to have the ground beef, you have to have an egg, you have to have milk, and you have to have breadcrumbs. And the seasoning and so forth are pretty much up to you. I always use some ketchup in the mix, and some onions, and usually a small can of mushrooms. But you can put in all kinds of other stuff. Since moving to Arizona, I have become a little more hot spice tolerant. So I always put some mild chili powder in. A place here in the area called the Santa Rita Spice Company, and that's where I buy mine. Some people put barbecue sauce instead of ketchup, or half and half. All of the other things, and they're in the recipe, you can add, leave out, or cut it your own way. But the important part is the meat, the eggs, the milk, and the breadcrumbs. When I moved out of the house and was on my own, one of the things I tried to do is I tried to make a meatloaf. My mother had told me the recipe. I don't think she ever wrote it down. In fact, writing this down for this broadcast took me a long time because I basically had to make it and write it down as I made it because I was doing it. I do it on autopilot now.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I made it, I was really looking forward to it. I'm going to have meatloaf like Mama used to make. I pull it out of the oven and I cut into it, and it's raw in the middle. What the heck did I do? So I got on the phone. Mom, I made the meatloaf just the way you told me, and it's raw in the middle. She said, did you put the egg in it?
Oh, because you need that as a binder.
You need it as a binder, and it transmits the heat or something like that.
Right, yeah.
You got to put the egg in. Don't forget that part. So that was my first time making it. I haven't forgotten the egg since then. And so the steps are, you need some breadcrumbs. If you have stale bread, start with that. If you don't, lightly toast some bread either the day before or the morning of, and then dice it up into small pieces. I tried it once with breadcrumbs out of a can,
Yeah,
and I think they're just too small.
Yeah.
The chunks of the bread, I think, really soak up some of the flavor and the juiciness, and that doesn't happen with breadcrumbs out of a can.
Yeah, I would imagine the bread comes out of a can sort of just adds to the mush. You don't get the textural kind of stuff with the actual toast that's cut into cubes.
Yep. I that's what I found out. That's what I found over the years. Like I said, this is a recipe I could make without consulting anything. The last time I made it, which was like last week, I did consult the recipe I'd written down just to make sure that it was okay, and it seems to be fine. You can pair it with your regular some kind of potato, some kind of veg, in a salad, and or anything that your mother used to make alongside of it. So Melva she was not a very talented cook. She made a few things well. I make a few things well. But my dad passed away when I was 11, so then she had to become mother, father, and breadwinner. And she did a pretty good job with that. Obviously, she was able to feed me. You can tell by my stature. And I'm still alive.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I have.
So let's talk about the pan.
Oh, yeah.
You had a recommended pan, and I will bring this up for folks to see.
My mother
Yeah.
always made it, and I always made it in a regular loaf pan.
Yeah.
When I got married to my current bride, 20 some years ago, she had a pan from her mother that had a little rack in the bottom that holds it off the bottom of the pan and allows the drippings to drip through so you don't get quite so much. So, and that one was so old, I think it was made with aluminum that was destined to become a B-17 at the end of World War II. And they got all this aluminum left over. Let's make something out of it. And it is still working.
Yeah.
So I was able to find this pan that has a similar feature with a rack in it to allow this meatloaf to drain out. And so as we are all watching our diet and our weight, this helps a little bit. but it still lets you have that comfort food from the 50s.
Yeah, this is a Chicago metallic. And the reason that I lit up when I saw this was because recently I started making bread, and then from bread it went to dough. My brother used to make basically regular crust or flat crust pizzas, and that was his thing. And he passed on, and I didn't want to feel like I was stepping on him. So I said, I've got to make deep dish Chicago pizzas. And to the Chicago Metallic Company makes some really good deep dish pans for pizzas. They also have smaller, like what you would call quarter pizzas, and they have the perforation at the bottom, like you see with this, in order to be able to still caramelize the crust, but not have it all, soak and sit in there. So, yeah, you've chose a Chicago Metallic 2-piece healthy meatloaf pan with draining insert. And I found their nonstick is exceptionally good with this. So that kind of got me excited. And when I saw that, dried thyme. That struck me when I saw that as an ingredient or as a possible ingredient. I use thyme when I cook a lot of Louisiana kind of dishes. So the optional dried thyme, seasoned salt, onion powder, garlic powder, and sliced mushrooms. I've never had meatloaf with sliced mushrooms in it as an optional. So.
We have some friends here in Arizona who I've made meatloaf for a couple times, and they enjoyed it the first time, and the second time they said that I should try putting some kernels of corn in there, like from canned corn or frozen corn, and it was a nice addition. I don't make it that way now, but what I'm trying to come to is this is a palate that you can change to your style of cuisine.
Yeah. Someday I'll do a show here that covers a dish that we have, Lithuanians did, kugelis, which actually has a Middle Eastern and also Jewish kind of, there's versions and Russian versions of it. But the Lithuanian dish I grew up with and got a handwritten directions from my aunt, had some specifications on it, which she would not do without it. But every other recipe it's a potato dish. It's like a potato meatloaf, to be honest with you, with lots of bacon and bacon grease in it. But she would insist never put onions in it. And it was one of those things that was a family tradition you never asked for. But if you look at all the other international recipes, and I've had students come over from Lithuania and I've attempted to make kugelis for them and they were much more polite, but they were like, where's the onions? So that was something got introduced from my aunt, from her mother, that for some reason, no onions in this thing, but the rest of the world sees it as onions. So I like your description of it being a palate where you can experiment with it. And I think some of my nephews have made kugelis with onions already, and some other ingredients. So yeah, it's exciting when you get, some people say, well, this is a really simple dish, but the beauty of simple dishes is that you can do variations on a theme if you want to. You can spice this up a little bit more for kind of your local flavor or taste. You can put veggies in there if you want to do that, although I imagine that would impact the texture, that it would fall apart easier if you had corn kernels throughout it. So, but it's fun to experiment. What the heck? It's going to go down your throat anyways. So, so yeah. I don't know if there's anything more you want to share about this in particular. The Worcestershire sauce, I don't. My mother used to make meatloaf. It was very flat, and I don't recall her. For her, Worcestershire would be being an Irish heritage. Worcestershire was just too fancy to put in it, but I think it is a very common inclusion in meatloaf. So I tried to look up the Santa Rita Spice Company and to see if they sold anything through Amazon.
They do.
Or if they do?
They do. They sell it through Amazon. I'll find it and send you a link. The last time I bought it through Amazon because none of the local grocery stores that I go to had it in stock. And that's something like salt, pepper, and Worcestershire sauce I always want on the shelf.
And here's the thing I didn't quite understand. Your mother grew up in Racine, Wisconsin, and wouldn't eat anything that swims.
Right. Because her family was a butcher shop.
Oh,
it wasn't a fishmonger. It was a butcher shop.
Oh, yeah.
And the story about her father, her grandfather as a little kid. There's a story that passed down through the history that he would be sent to the local to a farm a few miles away, and he would get the cow and walk it back to the butcher shop for butchering.
Wow. That it was a sign of the times, I guess. But that would feel kind of weird.
That would have been the 1800s.
Yeah, sign of the times. So before we wrap up, where can we find you or follow your work?
Well, I can be found on tmug.com for the Tucson Macintosh User Group. I have a website called thinkbob.com, as in think different.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have another website that is for my photography work, and that's dangerousbobphotography.com.
Okay, we'll make sure and get those in the show notes.
On the homepage of that, there's a picture of Dangerous Bob wearing a cowboy hat in my parents' living room during the Eisenhower administration.
Because
there were pretty dangerous for a 5-year-old.
Because Racine, Wisconsin, tons of cowboys in Racine, Wisconsin. Yeah, so I get it. Thank you for doing this and being a part of it. I love the fact that I'm getting stories from people on this that talk about their own heritage, their own experience. They're almost, some of the ones that I've covered recently, people are kind of embarrassed with the simplicity of what they're providing as a recipe. But the beauty of people being able to take this recipe and, mix and match it and try and experiment with it versus you have to follow this exact recipe. And I have a few favorite recipes that are you have to follow this specific recipe, but I also like these ones where you can improvise as a cook and, as you say, think differently around it. So thanks for listening, listeners. And Bob, thanks for being here, but also thank listeners for listening to 15-Minute Bites. The full recipe for Melva's meatloaf will be in the show notes. Links that we talked about will also be in the show notes. I think this is going to become a regular on dinner tables. I haven't had meatloaf in a while, but shows like this remind me, I got to go try that again. I got to go do that again. So if you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe or email us. You can email us at the podtalknetwork@gmail.com and let us know what you think if you have some ideas. And of course, if you're a tech person and want to be part of the show for 15 minutes and bring your recipe, we'd be happy to have you. But until next time, keep experimenting, keep cooking, and remember, good ideas often start at the table.